The air was unnaturally still that morning, the kind of silence that makes you suspect something has gone terribly wrong. I'd returned home earlier than planned, pulling my car into the familiar driveway of my lakeside mansion, expecting nothing more dramatic than a cup of coffee and maybe a quiet walk along the water. But instead of peace, I was greeted by a sight so absurd, so unreal, that it took me several long seconds to process what I was seeing. There was smoke curling from the chimney, lights glowing in the windows, and the faint echo of music playing from inside my supposedly empty home. My mansion, my private retreat, a fortress of quiet I had worked my entire life to build. And yet here it was, alive with the unmistakable signs of someone else's presence. I killed the engine and sat frozen, heart hammering. For 2 weeks I had been away on business, half across the country, trusting that my home would be as I left it. But as I stepped from the car, keys clenched in my fist like a weapon, I felt the prickling awareness that I was not alone. The front door opened before I even reached it, and out she came, Karen, the self-declared queen of the Homeowners Association. The woman who had spent years tormenting this community with petty fines, condescending notices, and her endless need for control. She was dressed in one of her trademark pastel blouses, hair sprayed stiff into submission, and she carried herself as if she had every right to be standing on my porch. "Oh, you're back early," she said, like I was the intruder. I stared at her, unable to form words at first. My house key still dangled uselessly from my grip. "What are you doing in my house?" Karen didn't flinch. She didn't apologize. She didn't even look surprised. "There were concerns about security," she said smoothly. "With you gone so long, I thought it best someone keep an eye on things." My blood pressure spiked. "Keep an eye? You've been living here?" She smiled, the kind of smile that was meant to pacify, but it only ignited my rage further. Just temporarily. It was for the good of the neighborhood. For the good of the neighborhood. That was her refrain for everything. Harassing families for leaving holiday decorations up a day too long. Threatening retirees with fines for grass that grew a half-inch past regulation length. Now breaking into my mansion and occupying it like some suburban warlord. I forced myself to breathe, to steady the shaking in my hands. "Get out now, before I call the police." Karen crossed her arms, eyes glinting with a defiance that told me she wasn't bluffing. "Go ahead, call them. See who they believe, the HOA president or you. You've already been warned about failing to comply with community standards." The gall of it left me momentarily speechless, and in that silence she delivered the final insult. "The police already know," she said. "I called them when I saw you pull into the driveway. Told them there was a suspicious man trying to break into this property. I nearly laughed at the audacity, nearly, until I saw the flashing lights crest the corner of the street. Sirens wailed, slicing through the still morning air. 2 patrol cars screeched to a stop in front of my house. Officers spilled out, hands on their holsters, eyes sweeping the scene. Karen raised her hand in a delicate little wave, pointing directly at me. "That's him, officers? He's trespassing." It was surreal. Me, the homeowner, the one who held the deed, the mortgage, the years of sweat equity, being accused of breaking into my own mansion. The officers fanned out, cautious, professional. When called out, "Sir, step away from the door," Karen, ever the actress, clutched her chest like a fainting victim. "Please be careful. He's been threatening me." I held my hands up, fighting to keep my voice calm. "This is my house. My name is on the deed." She's lying. She broke in while I was gone. The officers exchanged uncertain glances. They had no context. To them, this was just another domestic squabble in a neighborhood too wealthy for its own good. And Karen knew exactly how to weaponize appearances. She looked the part of the respectable suburban matriarch. Me, I was sweaty from travel, unshaven, with luggage still in the back of my car. Out of context, I looked every bit the trespasser she claimed I was. It took nearly an hour of heated explanation, phone calls, and finally producing documentation from my attorney before the officers backed down. Even then, they treated me like the problem. "You need to work this out civilly," one said as they departed. "We don't want to come back here again." Karen just stood there smirking. She didn't leave. She didn't apologize. She simply walked back inside my house like it still belonged to her. That was the moment I realized this was bigger than just a trespass. Karen wasn't acting alone. She had the HOA behind her, the bylaws, the petty fines, and the false authority she had wielded for years. She believed she was untouchable, and in that moment, with the law itself seemingly on her side, I almost believed it too. But I wasn't going to let her win. I went to war. The flashing lights from the patrol cars painted the walls of the neighborhood in pulsing red and blue, but inside my garage the world had narrowed to one desperate act of survival. My palms pressed hard into the governor's side, soaked with his blood, as the medic barked steady instructions. I was no longer a homeowner fighting over property lines. I was a man kneeling in the center of chaos, trying to keep another man's life from slipping away into the concrete beneath us. Tina stood nearby, her face pale, but her movements sharp and controlled. She had already handed over her belt to improvise a tourniquet. Now she was scanning the scene, her phone in hand, recording what needed to be preserved, saving the truth in case it was ever questioned. The rookie cop who had fired the shot sat against the wall, his weapon already confiscated, tears streaming down his face as the sergeant tried to keep him calm. None of that mattered to me. The only thing that mattered was keeping pressure, keeping the governor awake, keeping his chest rising and falling. Every shallow gasp felt like borrowed time, like we were cheating death by seconds. The medevac chopper arrived in a roar of blades that shook the trees. A team of paramedics stormed in, lifted the governor onto a stretcher, and within minutes he was being loaded out of my garage and into the bird that would carry him to the trauma center. The medic clapped my shoulder once, his eyes meeting mine with grim acknowledgement before sprinting to join the team. And then, just like that, he was gone. The flashing lights, the sirens, the thump of rotors faded into the night sky, leaving me kneeling on a stained floor, my hands shaking. My garage, my sanctuary, was no longer just a space for order and tools. It had become the stage of something catastrophic. Neighbors whispered from their lawns. Phones recorded. The quiet suburban street had turned into a crime scene. But even then, part of me knew this was not the end, it was the beginning, because nothing about that night had been an accident. The false report that sent armed officers to my house, the chaos that ended with the governor bleeding out on my floor. Someone had orchestrated it. Someone had pulled the strings, and I already knew whose fingers were on the threads. Karen Polson. The name alone curdled my blood. She had been the self-proclaimed queen of our HOA, hiding behind bylaws and fines, tightening her grip on our community one petty rule at a time. But beneath her smug smile and obsession with control, she was part of something bigger, something rotten, and that night proved it. She had tried to weaponize the system against me, and in doing so, she had nearly killed a governor. That wasn't neighborhood politics anymore. That was conspiracy. The state police secured the scene, pushed back the local officers, and locked down the cul-de-sac. Tina and I were taken aside, questioned and questioned again. By dawn, we were exhausted husks, but the picture was starting to sharpen. The anonymous report that had triggered the armed response came from inside the HOA system, Karen's system. She had fabricated a false threat, hoping to bury me in trouble. Instead, she'd put a bullet into the chest of the state's highest office holder. Days passed in a blur of phone calls, interviews, and tension. The governor survived. The medics' work, my hands, the hospital team, they had all bought him a second chance. Word came through official channels. He was alive, stable, and asking questions. Questions about how an HOA dispute in a quiet lakeside neighborhood had turned into an assassination-level security breach. Tina and I didn't wait to be asked twice. We turned our little mountain of evidence, property maps, doctored documents, fraudulent invoices, into a weapon. Tina was relentless. While I handled the investigators and prosecutors, She waged psychological war on Karen in ways only another homeowner could appreciate. Using Karen's own email templates, she began sending bylaw violations back at her. Every petty infraction Karen had ever used to humiliate others was now turned against her. A pumpkin flag left up too long? Fine. Garbage bins at the curb too late? Fine. An unapproved shade of paint on her mailbox? Another fine. Each email was cold, perfectly legal and undeniable. Karen's smug empire of control was collapsing under the weight of its own absurdity. But I was playing a deeper game. I filed motions, requests, and complaints. I buried the HOA board under their own paperwork. The bylaws they had written to keep us compliant became my arsenal to expose them. And as the weeks went by, the noose tightened. The breaking point came when neighbor Ed, the retired accountant with a new video doorbell, captured Karen in full meltdown mode. She stormed across her lawn one evening, screaming at Tina and me, shrieking about how she was the HOA, how we were nothing, how the community existed because of her. It was all recorded in crystal clarity, her voice cracking with desperation. That video hit every homeowner's inbox within hours. Karen's mask of control was shattered. No one could ever see her the same way again. From that moment, the tide turned. The other board members, once cowed by her dominance, began to distance themselves. Whispers spread. Meetings were scheduled. And then, one morning, I got the call. The Attorney General's office wanted me downtown. I walked into a conference room filled with suits and badges, the air heavy with anticipation. They had subpoenaed records, followed the money, and uncovered something even uglier than we imagined. Karen wasn't just a petty tyrant running a fraudulent HOA. She was in league with Richard Thorne, the developer who had built our community. Together, they had doctored maps, stolen land parcel by parcel, funneled inflated invoices through the HOA, and laundered the money through offshore accounts. And the cherry on top? Karen had been a plant from the very beginning, a county official who had rubber-stamped Thorne's plans a decade earlier. What started as a neighborhood feud had unraveled into a massive racketeering case. The prosecutor leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "Mr. Dunham," he said, "you didn't just expose a fraud. You helped us tear down an entire criminal enterprise. The weight of that hit me hard. I wasn't a cop. I wasn't a lawyer. I was just a man who wanted peace in his home, order in his garage, and honesty in his community. But in refusing to bend, in insisting on the truth, I had pulled a thread that brought their whole operation down. The stage was set for the final act. The emergency HOA meeting was scheduled. The agenda, a vote of no confidence in Karen Polson and a motion to open the books. The clubhouse was packed that morning, every neighbor present, every seat filled, anticipation buzzing in the air. Karen sat at the head of the table, immaculate as always, her face composed in a mask of icy calm. She believed she could bluff her way through, that she could still intimidate her way out of this storm. She was wrong. The doors opened mid-meeting. State troopers marched in, followed by the lead investigator. The room fell silent. The investigator read the charges: fraud, money laundering, racketeering. Karen's composure shattered. The queen of the cul-de-sac was handcuffed and led out before the entire community. Her treasurer was arrested moments later. And across town, Richard Thorne was being pulled from his gleaming corporate office in cuffs. The empire of lies collapsed in a single coordinated strike. As Karen was led past me, her eyes burned with venom. "You have no idea what you've done," she hissed. But I did. For the first time in years, our neighborhood was free. The aftermath was quieter, but no less significant. A receiver was appointed to manage the HOA. The stolen land was restored. The books were opened, refunds issued. For the first time in a long while, neighbors smiled at each other without fear. Kids played by the lake again. Ed chaired the finance committee with a zeal that bordered on religious. And Tina and I, we sat on our porch, watching it all unfold with the satisfaction of people who had endured the storm and come out stronger. The governor invited us to his office weeks later. He was thinner, scarred, but alive. He shook my hand firmly, thanking me for holding pressure that night. thanking Tina for her quick thinking. "You didn't just save my life," he said. "You gave us the leverage to clean house." He handed me a handwritten note. "The state owes you a favor. Call it when you need it." I tucked that letter away, not because I planned to use it, but because it was proof. Proof that ordinary people could stand against corruption, against bullies, against the illusion of untouchability. Karen and Thorne thought power came from titles and money. But real power came from truth, from persistence, from neighbors who refused to be cowed. One evening, as I tuned the Mustang in my garage, Tina leaned on the doorway, smiling softly. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "Nothing," I said honestly. For the first time in a long time, there was nothing heavy on my mind. No schemes, no battles, no chaos. Just the hum of an engine, the order of my tools, and the quiet of a neighborhood finally at peace. And after everything, that was the best feeling in the world.